The music world is full of talent, ambition, and creativity. Among the many, there was a young, hopeful musician named Leo Bennett, known for his deep love for music and a belief in its power to heal the soul. Leo was a rising star in the music industry, his melodies creating waves across the world. He was not just a talented musician, but also an artist with a deep sense of passion. Born in a small town in England, Leo had been drawn to music from a very young age. While other children played outside or engaged in sports, Leo was often found in the corner of the room, his fingers gently strumming his guitar strings. Leo had grown up in a modest family. His father was a carpenter and his mother worked as a teacher. Though they did not have much in terms of material wealth, they gave Leo the one thing that money could never buy: love and support. His parents encouraged his musical ambitions, even when others laughed at his dreams of becoming a successful artist. They would often tell him, "You don't need a big stage to perform. Your heart is the stage where your music will be heard." Those words echoed in his mind as he worked tirelessly, pouring his soul into his songs. Leo's journey into the music industry was not an easy one. After moving to the city to pursue his dreams, he faced rejection after rejection. He played in small, crowded clubs, hoping for a breakthrough. But most nights, his audience was no larger than the handful of people sitting in the back of the room. He spent long hours composing, practicing, and recording his music. But despite his efforts, fame eluded him. It was a constant struggle, one that weighed heavily on his heart. Yet, Leo never gave up. He believed in the magic of music and the hope that one day someone would recognize the potential in his work. During this time of uncertainty, Leo wrote the song that would change everything. He was sitting by the window of his apartment, gazing out at the bustling city streets, when the melody came to him. He began to play, the notes flowing effortlessly from his guitar, as if the song had always been there, waiting for him to find it. The lyrics were simple but powerful. They spoke of hope, dreams, and the challenges that life throws at us. The chorus was especially poignant, echoing the theme of resilience, and Leo poured every ounce of his emotion into the words. "In the silence of the night, I will sing my song. And though the world may turn away, I'll still be strong." After finishing the song, Leo felt a strange sense of calm wash over him. He knew that this song was special, something that could connect with people in a way his previous songs had not. Without hesitation, he recorded it and sent it to a well-known music producer. Within days, he received an invitation to meet with the producer, who was impressed with Leo's unique sound and raw talent. That meeting would mark the beginning of Leo's rise to fame. His song was soon being played on the radio, and within weeks it became a chart-topping hit. The success was overwhelming, but it brought with it a set of challenges Leo had not anticipated. As his fame grew, so did the pressure. The world expected him to keep producing hits to meet the demand of an industry that thrived on constant novelty. But Leo was no longer the same person who had written that song by the window. The pressure to live up to his newfound fame took a toll on him. He found himself struggling to find inspiration, unsure of how to create something that could match the success of his first hit. But the real challenge began when the unexplainable started to happen. One evening, as Leo sat alone in his studio working on his next project, he heard a strange noise. A soft melody playing in the background. At first, he thought it was just his imagination, but when he turned around, he saw the notes of his song glowing faintly in the air. He blinked, unsure of what he was seeing. The melody was echoing in the room, and the words of the song seemed to take on a life of their own. It was as though his song was no longer confined to the boundaries of his guitar and his voice. It was spilling into the world around him, shaping reality itself. Confused and intrigued, Leo sat down and listened. He realized that the lyrics he had written weeks ago were starting to come true. The world outside his window seemed to shift in response to the song's message. He could see people in the streets suddenly finding hope in their struggles, and others gaining strength in moments of weakness, all as though the song had reached them, inspiring them to press on. Leo was both amazed and frightened. How could his song, his creation, have such an impact on the real world? As days went by, the phenomenon only grew stronger. Each time Leo played his song, something remarkable would happen. One afternoon, while walking through the park, he heard a soft cry for help. Turning around, he saw a man trapped under a fallen tree branch, unable to move. Without thinking, Leo pulled out his guitar and began playing the familiar melody. As the notes filled the air, the tree branch lifted, allowing the man to escape. Leo stood in disbelief, realizing that his song had somehow made the impossible possible. The lyrics of his song, which had always been a reflection of his dreams, were now altering the fabric of reality. Breaking the rules of the night was out of the question. As Leo began to understand the true power of his music, he was torn between the excitement of his newfound ability and the fear of what might happen next. What if his song caused unintended consequences? What if it became too powerful to control? What if it started changing the world in ways he could not predict? The conflict within Leo was clear. He had always dreamed of making a difference with his music, but now that his songs were shaping reality, he had to ask himself whether he could handle the responsibility. Was this a blessing or a curse? The pressure was mounting, and Leo soon realized that his success in the music world had opened the door to something far greater and far more dangerous than he had ever imagined. The once hopeful musician was now faced with a dilemma. Could he control the power of his creation, or would his song spiral out of control, changing the world in ways he could never have predicted? The future was uncertain, and Leo's journey had only just begun. For the next few weeks, Leo spent his days carefully experimenting with the power his music seemed to possess. Every time he strummed the chords of his song, the world around him responded. People found comfort in their struggles, miracles unfolded, and the impossible became possible. But despite the awe and wonder that filled his heart, Leo couldn't shake a growing sense of unease. It was one thing to heal a broken spirit or move a tree branch, but what if his song started to affect things he couldn't control? One evening, as Leo walked through the dimly lit streets of London, the weight of his thoughts felt heavier than ever. The soft glow of the street lamps flickered, casting long shadows across the cobblestone streets. The sounds of the city, distant voices, the hum of carriages, and the rustle of leaves in the breeze seemed muted, as though the world had gone into a strange kind of hush. Leo couldn't help but feel that something was about to change. His footsteps echoed softly, mingling with the whispers of his mind. As he turned a corner, he passed a small, unassuming cafe, its windows fogged with the warmth from inside. Through the mist, Leo caught a glimpse of a woman sitting alone at a table, her eyes downcast, lost in thought. She appeared to be writing something in a notebook, her fingers hovering over the page as if struggling to find the right words. Leo's gaze lingered on her for a moment, intrigued by her quiet intensity. Something about her drew him in. It wasn't desperation. Unbeknownst to Leo, this was the moment that would shatter the carefully constructed world he had been living in since the song's success. He walked past the cafe without a second thought, but as he did, his hand brushed the edge of his guitar case, and instinctively he strummed a few chords. The notes were gentle, almost hesitant, but they rang out in the cool night air, wrapping the street in their sound. As the melody played, Leo noticed a strange sensation in the pit of his stomach, a prickling awareness that something was off. His heart beat faster as he felt the familiar energy of his song rise. But this time, it wasn't the peaceful, life-affirming force he had grown used to. This felt different. The air felt thick, heavy with something he couldn't yet name. Before he could make sense of it, he heard a faint, dissonant sound coming from behind him. He turned to find the woman from the cafe standing at the door, her face pale, her eyes wide with disbelief. She looked at him as if he were a ghost, her mouth opening and closing, as though trying to speak but finding no words. Are you all right?" Leo asked, his voice cautious. He didn't know what to make of her reaction. The woman blinked rapidly, her hands shaking as she held onto the doorframe for support. I think I know you," she stammered. I think it's you." "Oh." Leo took a step closer, his confusion deepening. "I'm sorry. I don't understand. Do you know me?" The woman's eyes were wide now, her pupils dilated as if she was struggling to keep herself grounded. She took a deep breath as if to steady herself, and then pointed at him. "Your song. It's happening. It's real, isn't it? What you sing. It's happening in real life." The words hung in the air, a strange weight settling between them. Leo felt a chill run down his spine as he tried to make sense of her words. What was she talking about? How could she know? There was a training round that went really poorly. I don't know what you mean," he replied, though his voice trembled slightly. He hadn't told anyone about the strange events surrounding his song. He hadn't even fully come to terms with it himself. But the woman seemed so certain, as if she were speaking from personal experience. Her gaze never left him as she took a few unsteady steps forward, her breath shallow. "The things you sing about, they're coming true. Your song, it's doing something to me. It's changing everything. She stopped herself, her eyes darting around, as if afraid someone might overhear. "Please," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I need your help." Leo's mind raced, his heart pounding in his chest. This wasn't just about a song anymore. It was something far more serious, far more dangerous. He had created something powerful, something that was reaching beyond him, beyond his control. The woman's words confirmed his worst fear. The song's influence was spreading, affecting people in ways he couldn't have imagined. "Please," she repeated, her voice desperate now. I didn't ask for this. I just wanted to write, to find my own voice. But your song, it's becoming part of me. It's in everything I do. I can't escape it." Her hands trembled as she clutched her notebook, the pages barely visible in the dim light. "It's like it's controlling me." And Before she could finish, Leo's eyes locked onto the notebook she was holding. There, written in bold, hurried letters, were the lyrics of his song. His heart skipped a beat. The words on the page were the same ones he had written, the same ones that had been spreading through the world. But here they were, in her handwriting, as though she had somehow absorbed them. The woman looked at him with a mix of fear and pleading. "I don't know how, but it's like your song is taking over everything I write. It's changing the way I see the world, changing the way I think. You have to stop it, Leo. Please. You have to make it stop." Leo felt his blood run cold. The magnitude of what he had done was crashing down on him. He had only ever wanted to create music that inspired, that healed, but now his creation had crossed a line. It was no longer just a song. It was a force, one that could reshape the lives of anyone who came into contact with it. At first, he was too shocked and frightened to move. The woman's desperate plea hit him like a punch to the gut. He had been so focused on the possibilities of his music, on the beauty of its power, that he hadn't realized how dangerous it could become. "I didn't mean for this to happen," Leo whispered, his voice thick with guilt. "I didn't know." But as the woman backed away, clutching her notebook tightly, he realized there was no turning back. The song was out of his control, and the world, it seemed, was beginning to change in ways he couldn't have anticipated. And now, more than ever, Leo had to make a choice. Would he find a way to stop the chaos his song had caused, or would he allow it to consume everything he had worked for, and more? The days that followed Leo's encounter with the woman from the cafe were a blur of confusion and panic. After their brief conversation, she had disappeared into the shadows, leaving Leo with more questions than answers. The weight of her words, about the song controlling her, changing her life, pressed on him like an invisible hand, changing her hand's hand. Hair soft and change. How could something as beautiful as his song become so dangerous? She ended. For the first time in his life, Leo found himself trapped in a situation he couldn't fix with a simple melody. The magic he had always thought of as a gift now felt like a curse. And as the days went on, he began to see the consequences of his creation. He was no longer just a musician. He was a part of something much larger. Something that was spiraling out of control. One night, Leo sat in his dimly lit studio, surrounded by empty coffee cups and crumpled sheets of paper. The guitar sat before him, silent. He hadn't played it in days, afraid that every note would make the situation worse. Yet, no matter how hard he tried to ignore it, the song was still there, clawing in his mind, clawing its way to the surface. He couldn't escape it. Leo's thoughts were interrupted by the soft creak of the door. He looked up to find a figure standing in the doorway, silhouetted against the moonlight. "Leo?" The voice was familiar, soft, hesitant. It was Mary. A childhood friend he had known since his days in the small town where he had grown up. Mary had always been a supportive presence in his life, but she had moved to the city years ago, and they had lost touch over time. "What are you doing here?" Leo asked, surprised to see her. Mary stepped into the room, her eyes scanning the cluttered space. "I heard what happened," she said quietly. "About the song, about everything." Leo felt his stomach tighten. He hadn't wanted anyone to know. The idea of his secret getting out, of others experiencing the chaos his music was causing, filled him with dread. "I didn't mean for this to happen," Leo muttered, his hands gripping the edge of the table. I wrote a song. I never thought it would—" "Leo," Mary interrupted gently, "you can't keep hiding from this. You have to face what's happening. People need help." Leo's chest tightened at her words. "I don't know how," he admitted. "I don't know how to stop it. I didn't want any of this. All I wanted was to make music that mattered." "But," Mary stepped forward, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Then let me help you," she said. "We can figure this out together." Her words offered a sense of comfort, but they also served as a reminder of just how far out of control everything had gotten. Leo couldn't shake the feeling that he was being pulled deeper into a storm he couldn't navigate alone. As the days passed, Leo's fears proved well-founded. The effects of his song began to spread beyond what he could have imagined. People in the city began to behave strangely, acting on impulses, following the lyrics as though they were gospel. Leo saw it everywhere. A man quitting his job to chase a dream he had been too afraid to follow. A woman confronting her deepest fears without hesitation, and even small acts of kindness, unfolding like a ripple effect. But it wasn't just positive changes. There were darker consequences too. People began to use the song for their own gain, manipulating its power to create situations that were far from innocent. Leo overheard conversations in cafes, in alleyways, about people taking advantage of the song's influence, bending it to their will. One evening, Leo and Mary were walking down a narrow alley when they encountered a group of men standing around a fire. They were talking loudly, laughing, and Leo could see the notebook in one of their hands, its pages scribbled with the lyrics to his song. "What's going on?" Leo asked, his voice low. Mary grabbed his arm, pulling him back. "Stay quiet," she whispered. "These guys are using the song. They think it gives them power." Leo's heart raced as he watched the men. They were laughing as one of them read aloud from the notebook. The words seemed to take on a life of their own, bending the atmosphere around them. "I'll make her love me," the man with the notebook said. "I'll play this song and she'll have no choice. She'll be mine." Leo felt a sickening knot in his stomach. These men were twisting his creation into something dark, using it to manipulate others, to control them. This was the opposite of everything he had wanted. Before Leo could stop her, Mary stepped forward, her voice firm. "You can't use his song like that." The men turned, surprised by her sudden appearance. "What's it to you?" one of them sneered. Mary stood her ground. "It's his song," she said, pointing at Leo, "and you don't get to use it for selfish reasons." Again, for a moment, there was silence. Leo felt his chest tighten, his fingers itching to grab his guitar, to do something to stop them. But he wasn't sure what to do. Could his song even stop these men now that it was in their hands? The leader of the group sneered and walked over to Leo, taking a threatening step toward him. "So, you're the genius behind this?" he asked, his voice dripping with malice. "I think we should have a little chat about how to use this power properly." Leo's heart hammered in his chest. This was it. The moment when his creation had gone too far. The moment when the stakes became dangerously high. "Leave him alone," Mary said, stepping between Leo and the men. Her voice was no longer tentative, but strong, determined. "Take a move, my lads." One of the men grabbed her arm, pulling her away from Leo. "Get out of the way, lady," he growled. "One doesn't look as unkind as he." Leo's mind raced. He couldn't let this continue. He couldn't let his song be twisted like this. Without thinking, he pulled his guitar from its case and began to play. The familiar melody filled the air, but this time the notes felt different, more urgent. As the music swirled around him, the men froze, their expressions turning from smug to uncertain. The of the song surged outward, wrapping around them, pulling them into its rhythm. For a moment, the world seemed to slow, as if everything was held in place by the music. Then something unexpected happened. One of the men, the one holding the notebook, dropped it to the ground, his hands shaking. "What's happening?" he gasped. Leo stopped playing, his fingers frozen over the strings. The men stood motionless, their faces pale. The song's influence had turned on them, and they were no longer in control. But Leo knew this wasn't over. The power of the song was growing stronger, more unpredictable. The danger was real, and it wasn't just about him anymore. It was about the world, about the people who had come into contact with his creation. As the men scrambled to recover, Leo turned to Mary, his face grim. "We have to stop this," he said, "before it's too late." But deep down, Leo knew that stopping it wouldn't be easy. The song had become something far more dangerous than he ever could have imagined. And there were others, enemies who would stop at nothing to use its power for their own gain. The stakes were higher than ever. The city had become a battleground, one that Leo had never intended to create. The song he had crafted, born from his desire to inspire, to heal, had morphed into a force too powerful to control. As he walked through the dimly lit streets, his guitar slung over his shoulder, the weight of his actions pressed down on him like an anchor. He had tried to ignore it, tried to push the feeling aside, but he knew what had to be done. The song needed to end. It was not just a song anymore. It had become a living thing, an entity with its own power that reached out into the world, altering the lives of those who came into contact with it. Leo could feel the music vibrating through the air, as if it were alive, beckoning him, pulling him in. It was a beautiful melody, but it had become a monster, devouring everything in its path. As he made his way toward the central square, he noticed people everywhere, frozen in place, staring at the sky, as if waiting for something to happen. The lyrics of the song had seeped into their very souls, and now they were like puppets, caught in the web of his creation. The air was thick with tension, the world holding its breath. Then, from the shadows, Leo saw them. The men from the alley, the ones who had tried to use his song for their own gain. They stood together, their faces twisted in a mix of awe and greed, clutching the notebook with his lyrics in their hands. Their eyes were wide with a fanatical glow, as if the song had taken hold of them completely. "We knew you'd come," the leader of the group sneered, stepping forward. "You can't escape it, Leo. The song is ours now. You can't stop it. No one can." Leo's heart pounded in his chest as he faced them. This was it, the moment of truth. He had spent so long running from the consequences of his creation, hoping that it would resolve itself, but now he realized that he was the only one who could stop it. He was the key to ending this madness. "I have to end it," Leo muttered, more to himself than to the men before him. The leader laughed, a cold, mocking sound. "End it. You think you can stop it. You have no control anymore. The song belongs to us all. It's part of the world now. The song makes it rain." Leo's mind raced. He knew they were right in one sense. The song had spread far beyond his control. But he also knew that the song had a source, the spark that had set everything in motion. And that spark was him. His music, his creation, was tied to his heart, to his soul. If anyone could end it, it was him. But how? The song had taken on a life of its own, a force that had already begun to twist the fabric of reality. Leo wasn't sure if he could control it anymore, let alone stop it. He was afraid. Afraid of what would happen if he failed. Afraid of what the world would become if the song continued to spread unchecked. Without thinking, Leo raised his guitar, his hands trembling. He had no choice. The only way to end this was to play the song once more. This time with every ounce of power he had left. The moment his fingers touched the strings, the world seemed to shift. The air vibrated with the energy of the melody, the notes hanging in the space around him, thick with possibility. The song filled the square, louder now, more intense, like a storm gathering force. Leo could feel it, could feel the song pushing against him, testing him, as if it were alive, resisting him. But he fought back, pushing through the resistance. "Stop!" the leader of the group shouted, stepping forward. "You don't know what you're doing. You can't stop it. You don't have the power." But Leo wasn't listening. He played with all his heart, pouring his fear, his guilt, and his hope into each note. He played with everything he had, knowing that this was the only way to break the cycle. The song had been born from his soul, and only by offering up his soul could he destroy it. As the melody grew, the power of the song seemed to expand, spreading out like an invisible wave, crashing over the people in the square. The men from the alley tried to shield their eyes, but they were powerless. The song had already seeped into their hearts, and now it was unmaking them. They writhed in place, caught in its grip, unable to escape. Leo's hands were numb from the effort, but he couldn't stop. He had to finish it. The world had to be freed from this madness. He could feel the energy of the song building, each note reverberating in his chest, and he knew that he was on the edge of something irreversible. But there was no turning back now. No. Suddenly, the sky above seemed to darken, the city around him warping in response to the intensity of the song. The air crackled with energy, and Leo felt as though the world itself was trembling under the weight of the music. The city, the people, everything was bound to this moment, to this decision. In the distance, he heard a faint voice, soft at first, then growing louder, a chorus of voices joining in. It was the people, the ones who had been swept up by the song, who had let it take hold of them. They were singing, their voices rising in unison, blending with his own, as if the song had reached inside them, pulling them together. "Leo, stop!" Mary's voice broke through the chaos, her hand grabbing his arm. He looked up to find her standing beside him, her face filled with worry. "I have to finish it," Leo whispered, his voice hoarse. "But you're hurting them," she pleaded. "They're not enemies, they're lost. We need to help them, not destroy them." For a moment, Leo hesitated, his fingers faltering on the strings. Mary's words cut through him, reaching the part of him that had wanted to fix everything, to save the world. Could he really end it this way? Could he destroy something that had brought so much good, even if it had also caused harm? The answer came to him in a flash. He couldn't stop the song with force. He couldn't destroy it. But he could change it, reshape it. He pressed the button. The music changed. With a deep breath, Leo closed his eyes and played the final chord, not one of destruction, but one of peace, of closure. The music swelled and then softened, wrapping itself around the world, slowly bringing it back to balance. The sky lightened, the air settled, and the people in the square seemed to breathe again, their eyes clearing as if waking from a dream. The power of the song had shifted, no longer a force of chaos, but a force of understanding. The world was still for a moment, and then the people began to disperse, their minds free from the song's grip. Leo looked at Mary, his heart still racing, but now, for the first time in days, with a sense of relief. "I think it's over," he whispered. But deep down, Leo knew that the song had changed him and the world forever. The air had cleared, the song's last lingering notes fading into the night like a whispered goodbye. The chaos that had once consumed the city, its streets alive with madness, its people caught in a strange and hypnotic rhythm, was over. Leo stood in the center of the square, surrounded by a stunned silence. His hands were shaking, the guitar hanging loosely from his fingers, as if it had become a foreign object. Dive into the activity. As long as he was, Ben could count the rhythms. The ground beneath him seemed to hum faintly, the last remnants of the song still vibrating in his bones. Around him, people began to stir, their expressions confused at first, as if they were waking from a dream. They blinked, slowly returning to themselves, their faces etched with the same bewilderment that Leo himself felt. The energy that had once bound them together was now gone, replaced by an eerie quiet. Mary stood beside him, her gaze fixed on the crowd. "You did it," she said, her voice soft but filled with awe. Leo nodded, but the weight of what had just happened was settling heavily on his chest. He had done it. He had stopped the song. But the world had changed. People's lives had been altered, not just by the song, but by the events that had followed in its wake. How would they move forward? How could he explain this to them? How could he explain this to them? How could he make them understand that his music, Something that had once been his joy had caused so much pain. But there was no time for reflection now. As people started to move away, some hesitating, some walking with confusion in their eyes, Leo knew the consequences of what he had done would continue to unfold. The song had been a force beyond him, but it had also revealed something deeper: the power of connection, the fragility of the human mind, and the choices we all make in response to the world around us. The next few days were a blur. Leo found himself retreating into his apartment, unable to face the outside world. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the faces of those who had been touched by his song. Some filled with hope, others with fear or loss. He had hoped to fix everything with one final chord, but the truth was more complicated than that. There was no easy answer, no way to undo the damage. Mary had stayed by his side, offering him comfort and a listening ear. She had always been there for him, even when he hadn't known he needed her. As they sat together in his studio one evening, Mary spoke the words Leo had been avoiding. "I had some fantasies about where our future might take us." Leo looked from Leo to Mary and understood she was taking Irwol's bet. "You know, the song didn't just bring chaos," she said, her tone thoughtful. "It brought people together too. It made them face things they'd been hiding from, made them change in ways they never expected. Maybe there's something in that. Something good." Leo looked at her, his eyes tired. But at what cost? People were hurt. Some of them didn't even know what they were doing. "I know," Mary said softly. "But that's the thing with power, Leo. It's not always clear, not always black and white. People make choices. They have to live with them. But they also have the chance to grow, to make new choices." Her words struck a chord deep inside him. She was right. He couldn't erase the past, but he could choose to move forward. He could find a way to rebuild, to use his music for something better. It wouldn't be easy. There would be no quick fixes, no simple resolutions. But he wasn't alone. Not anymore. A week passed, and Leo ventured outside for the first time since the song had been silenced. The city had begun to heal. People went about their lives, though many carried the weight of what had happened. There were quiet conversations in cafes, whispered debates about the song's true power and what it meant for the future. It was clear that the effects of the song would not simply vanish, but there was also a sense of hope in the air. People were beginning to talk about the changes they had made, the ways they had chosen to live differently because of it. Leo took a deep breath as he walked through the park, the familiar sights of his city now coloured with a new sense of possibility. There were no grand gestures, no public celebrations, but there was a quiet understanding that things had shifted. The song had been a catalyst, but it was the people who had made the choice to change. When Leo reached the small cafe on the corner where he and Mary used to meet, he saw her sitting at their usual table, a warm smile on her face. For the first time in what felt like forever, Leo felt a sense of peace settle in his chest. "You're here," Mary said as he approached, her voice filled with warmth. "I was wondering if you'd come out." "I had to," Leo replied, sitting down across from her. "I'm starting to see that there's more to all of this than just what happened with the song. Maybe it wasn't all bad." Lily rested her forearms on the table. Mary's eyes softened, and she placed her hand over his. Leo nodded, the weight in his chest finally starting to lift. "It's going to be a long road," he said, "but I think I'm ready to face it." "Oh," Mary smiled, squeezing his hand. "I know you are." The days that followed were filled with small steps, talking to the people who had been affected by the song, trying to help them make sense of their experiences. Leo didn't have all the answers, but he was there to listen, to offer what he could. The city had been changed, yes, but not beyond repair. And neither was Leo. Over time, he began to compose again, but this time with a new understanding of the power his music held. He no longer sought fame or approval. Instead, he wanted to create something that could truly connect people, something that could heal rather than harm. Mary remained by his side, her presence a constant reminder that, while the road ahead was uncertain, he wasn't walking it alone. Together, they had faced the consequences of his actions, and together they would continue forward, taking each day as it came. The song had been a lesson, a catalyst for change, but it was not the end of Leo's story. It was only the beginning. As he sat down at his guitar, the familiar strings beneath his fingers, Leo felt a sense of calm wash over him. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew one thing for certain. He was ready to write his own story now. Months passed, and the city gradually returned to its rhythm. The sky no longer hummed with the reverberations of Leo's song, but its aftershocks still lingered in the hearts of those who had been touched by it. People were slowly rebuilding their lives, mending the fractures caused by the chaos. And so was Leo. He had come to terms with the truth, that the song had not only been a gift, but also a dangerous force. It had revealed the depths of human connection and the fragility of the mind. It had forced people to confront their greatest fears and desires, but it had also shown them the power of choice, the strength that lies in the ability to shape one's destiny despite external forces. Leo had stopped searching for quick answers, stopped trying to fix things in a single stroke. Instead, he focused on the small steps, the moments of connection that began to heal the wounds the song had left behind. He spent more time with Mary, who had become not just his anchor, but a partner in every sense of the word. Together, they had faced the repercussions of his creation, and, together, they had found a way forward. It was a crisp autumn afternoon when Leo finally decided to perform again. He had been hesitant at first, unsure if the world was ready for his music again. But now, standing before the small crowd in a dimly lit cafe, he felt a calm that had eluded him for so long. His guitar rested comfortably in his hands, its strings soft under his touch, and the weight of his past was no longer an overwhelming burden. The cafe had become a sanctuary of sorts, a place where people gathered not just to listen to music, but to share their stories, their experiences. It was a space of healing, a place where Leo could begin to rebuild, not just as an artist, but as a person. The crowd tonight was intimate. Friends, regulars, those who had supported him through the darkest of times. As Leo began to play, the first notes were slow, reflective, almost hesitant. The music had changed, just as he had. He no longer sought to control it or force it into a specific mold. He allowed the melody to unfold naturally, guided by the rhythm of his heart. The song that emerged was not a grand composition, but a simple, heartfelt melody, one of healing, of growth, and of renewal. As the last note drifted into the air, Leo set his guitar aside and looked out at the crowd. There was a quiet moment, then a gentle round of applause. But it wasn't the applause that mattered to Leo. It was the understanding in their eyes, the recognition that this music wasn't the same as before. It had evolved, just as he had. Mary stood at the back of the room, her eyes shining with pride. She had watched Leo struggle, seen him wrestle with the weight of his creation, and now she saw the man who had learned from it. He was not perfect, and neither was the world, but he had found peace in accepting the complexity of it all. After the performance, as the crowd dispersed and the cafe slowly emptied, Mary approached Leo. She didn't speak immediately, just took his hand in hers. Together, they walked to the window, looking out at the city, now calm beneath the evening sky. Leo nodded, a smile tugging at his lips. "I have," he replied, his voice filled with certainty. "I don't need to control everything anymore. I just need to be true to myself." The weight of the past no longer seemed so heavy. There was a clarity now, a realization that even the most powerful of forces, whether a song or a mistake, could be transformed into something meaningful, something that could lead to growth. The key was not to fight against it, but to learn from it and to move forward step by step. As the days turned into weeks, Leo's music began to find its place again in the world, but this time with a new purpose. He performed at small venues for those who had been affected by the song's initial chaos, and slowly, the people who had once been afraid of the power of his music came to understand it in a different light. Leo wasn't creating anthems of conquest or revolution anymore. Then, his music was now a tool for healing, a way to bridge the gap between people, to remind them of their shared humanity. Leo no longer saw himself as an isolated artist, someone disconnected from the world he was creating. Instead, he saw himself as part of something larger, a community, a world filled with people who, despite their differences, shared the same struggles, the same hopes, the same dreams. His music was no longer about control, but about connection. And that connection was where the true power lay. One evening, after a particularly moving performance, a woman approached him. She was older, her face lined with the weight of years, but her eyes sparkled with a sense of understanding. "Thank you," she said softly. "Your music. It brought me back. I had forgotten what it meant to truly listen, to really feel." Leo smiled, grateful for her words. It wasn't fame or acclaim that he had sought all this time. It was moments like this, when his music reached someone in a way that words alone could not. When it made a difference, even if it was just to one person. As the weeks went on, Leo continued to perform, but more importantly, he continued to live, embracing the world and the lessons it had taught him. He no longer feared the consequences of his actions because he understood that every choice, no matter how small, had the power to shape the future. The song had been both a gift and a curse, but it had led him to this moment, to the realization that the greatest power lay not in creation alone, but in the ability to adapt, to learn, and to grow. One crisp morning, as Leo and Mary sat on a park bench, watching the sun rise over the city, he turned to her and spoke the words that had been in his heart for so long. Mary smiled, her eyes soft with affection. "We all have to learn that lesson, Leo. Sometimes the hardest part is realizing that we can't control everything, but we can still choose how we respond." Lydia stared up at the sky. Leo took her hand in his, feeling the warmth of her touch. They didn't need to say anything more. They both knew the journey they had been on, and the one that was still to come. The music would continue, but now it would be a reflection of who they had become, not just who they had been. And with that, Leo finally understood the greatest lesson of all. It wasn't about the song, or the world, or even the mistakes he had made. It was about the connections he had formed along the way. The people who had walked beside him, the ones who had shown him the power of forgiveness, the importance of understanding, and the beauty of moving forward, one note at a time. It was then that Leo realized he wasn't alone. As they sat there, watching the sun rise over the city, Leo knew that his music would continue to evolve, but the true melody of his life was already playing. It was a song of growth, of redemption, and of love. And that was enough.